Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Elder Scrolls universe. My name is Camel, but more excitingly, however, welcome back to a new episode of the Elder Scrolls Detective series. It's a series in which we investigate, curate, speculate, hypothesize, theorize, and quite often simply highlight and discuss interesting, mysterious, and hidden things that can be found within the Elder Scrolls games. Today we will be taking a look at a seldom seen nugget of rather obscure lore, as not only is it exclusively tucked away within the far corners of the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall, but it is truly a strange tale that you most certainly will not soon forget. Now, if this kind of stuff interests you, be sure to check out my other Elder Scrolls Detective videos that I have already done. They can be found down in the description via the Elder Scrolls Detective playlist link. Now, down there in the description, you can also find all of my social media links. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch, and be sure to head over to the merch store with over 100 items carefully crafted for lovers of the Elder Scrolls. Just like this Camel Elder Scrolls blanket, designed by yours truly. It will keep you warm and up to date with lore while you watch these videos. It's a great way to support the channel and get something cool as well. But for now, sit back, relax, and prep your brain for some wacky Elder Scrolls lore at its finest. Now, if you are like me, you probably feel pretty down with the times when it comes to the gods, deities, and beings of a higher power or worship within the Elder Scrolls games. There are plenty of gods to pick from, between the two primal forces, Anu and Padome, along with the Aedra, the Nine Divines, Akatosh, Arche, Dibella, Julianos, Kynareth, Mara, Stendar, Zenithar, and of course, Talos, if you've resisted the brainwashing of the Thalmor, that is. Now, on top of this, we have some of the more enigmatic Etada, or original spirits, like Lorcan, the trickster god, and Magnus, the god of magic, the sun. And of course, his children, the Magna Gi, such as the blue star Nemo Li, Una of Bardau, Ziralig, and even Merid Nunda, aka Meridia, if you want to be an arcane smarty pants. Along with this, there are naturally the classics, everyone's favorite, the 17 Daedric Princes, Azura, Boethia, Clavicus Vile, Hermaeus Mora, Hircine, Jigalag, Malakath, Mehrunes, Dagon, Mephala, Meridia, Molagbal, Namira, Nocturnal, Periite, Sanguine, Sheogorath, and Vermina. And along with the Daedric Princes, we have their offspring, the Demi-Princes, as they're known, such as Farnuit Hen, the multiplier of motions known, or the obscure Demi-Prince of pastries. There is the demigoddess Dirola, along with the mysterious merchant Impresario, and even such figures as Alandro Sul, Emeg Gro Kyra, Haemon Cameron, Molag Grundor, and Ozozakar. But it doesn't end there, as we also have the living gods such as Dagoth Vivek, Sothasil, and Almalexia, and the earthbones such as Yifa or Yifri, the storyteller. There is also the Ada, the divine spirits such as Morehouse, the winged bull, and the star-made knight Pelinal Whitestrake. Then there are of course those who are just worshipped as gods, such as Emperor Zero Kulikane, or the first Dragonborn Mirak, or the High Priestess Selene, and of course Manamako, the King of Worms. Or other godly things like Sithis, the Night Mother, the Hist, or the Ideal Masters, and the rest that I can't think of right now. But you get the gist. The list goes on and leaves us with a rich array of so-called gods in whatever form they may come. But then we multiply this list with a vast variety of differing names that each of the aforementioned entities bears among the colourful cultures of the Elder Scrolls, both past and present. And what are we left with? Well, we are left with a staggering quantity of names, titles, and beings on our hands when it comes to, in a broad sense, the gods of the Elder Scrolls, which is fantastic. But despite all of this, there are some gods that go totally unnoticed, unheard by most of your keen ears, such as today's topic. As I'm curious to know, have you ever heard of Ius, the extremely agitated god of animals? No? Well, that is understandable, but it is a name that you are definitely going to remember after today. And along with Ius, did you know that within the Elder Scrolls there are wombats? Also no? Well, it's little wonder, as the gilded texts that speak of their existence along with Ius can only be found tucked away in the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall, which at the time of me writing these words was released over 26 years ago. Now, as the Elder Scrolls detective and an Australian, naturally it is my duty and honour to shed light on Ius and the Wombat. So now that our appetites for the obscure have been whetted, let's get straight to it, shall we? Within the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall, one may just be so lucky enough to run across this book titled Ius, Animal God, written by Bulger Somar, who I might add has authored no other books, as it was probably very hard to find a publisher after releasing this piece of work. Within its pages are some of the strangest canon in-game lore that I've ever heard, which in regards to the Elder Scrolls, that's really saying something. So again, I would ask you to sit back and relax while I recite to you this blessed scripture. The statues one sees throughout Valenwood and parts of Hammerfell and elsewhere that seem to be of a misshapen humanoid carrying a rod are of Ius, the god of animals. The rod he carries has its origin in the tales of the ox and the evil farmer. It seems that one day an evil farmer decided to kill all of his animals and have a big party. As the story unfolds, animal after animal is killed and prepared for a big meal. Lastly, the farmer comes to the ox and prepares to slit its throat. The ox, not wishing to be anybody's dinner, prayed very vocally to Ius. This came out as a loud moo, of course. At that very instant, Ius appeared, carrying a rather large set of balance weights. Without explanation, Ius ate the farmer and vanished. Ever since that day, Ius the extremely agitated has always been portrayed as carrying a large set of scales with him. The local Ius worshippers have no idea why and do not seem to care, although this story has been called fanciful at best. I personally know a raccoon who had actually talked to the ox. That is, before the ox became filler for the local inn's larder. I do not have any information one way or another about the validity of this second myth. It is, however, quite traditional. It seems that many years ago, before the reign of Uriel Septim VII, before the reign of Sepphoris Septim II, yes, even before the age of Pelagius Septim III, long may his name be praised, there lived a wombat who was the pet of Lady Greelina, daughter of Lord Prufrock of Rock Creek. Lady Greelina loved her wombat so, and it loved her too with all the passionate intensity a marsupial can muster. Unfortunately, it was a time of great sorrow in Rock Creek. A pestilence had come through the town, destroying all their crops, which consisted of raspberries and a few scraggly odd weeds that caused Argonian women to look very attractive to those who partook. Then a plague had come, inflicting nearly every cobbler with chronic hiccups. And finally a witch had cursed the town's people, so the only words they could utter were, precisely. All of the businesses, stores, and guilds fled from the town faster than an extremely fast thing. Lady Greelina saw her father despairing the loss the town was suffering, so she brought her wombat in and told him, "Father, my wombat can save us all, for it is sacred to the god Ius, god of animals. The only reason I didn't tell you earlier is because I am an early adolescent, going through that period where I don't like to communicate. But please ask a wish of my wombat, and Ius will fulfill it, for my wombat loves me." The king thought this was fairly flaky, but he had nothing to lose, so he uttered a modest wish to the wombat. "All I want is for one business to come to Rock Creek that will never leave no matter the calamity." I probably should have mentioned before that the king had always been cruel to the wombat. He used to lick it and try to make it stick to walls. So the wombat had Ius create an equipment store in front of the palace gate that would never go away. The royal family ended up going mad and eating one another, and ironically, the wombat was one of the first to go. But this is why there is to this day an equipment store blocking the palace gate in Rock Creek. If you don't believe me, go there and see. Okay, now take it easy while we ease out of that psychedelic masterpiece. So this book, firstly, is wonderful, and secondly, has a funny backstory to it, as it's actually an Easter egg, which could, / most certainly does, explain some, if not all, of the more wacky elements within its pages. Now, I had the chance to interview Ted Peterson, the OG Elder Scrolls lore godfather, who was the writer for Arena and Daggerfall, and later he went on to write books for Morrowind and Oblivion after he'd left Bethesda. You can, and I would highly suggest that you do, check out the full 4-hour-ish interview above if you are interested. Ted created a ton of the Elder Scrolls lore that we know and love today. He even invented Sheogorath and named the Daedric Prince after himself. He's a lovely guy, a wacky character, a funny dude, and just an interesting bloke to talk to. But I bring that up because Ted Peterson is responsible for Ius, the animal god. So who better to listen to about Ius than the man who created it himself, Ted Peterson. Here are relevant snippets when it comes to Ius from our various calls together. At the moment, I'm working on a video on Ius, the animal god.
Okay. Oh, Jesus. Oh my God. I know exactly what you're talking about.
When you wrote the Ius, the animal god thing, did you have in mind a way that he makes sense in the lore? Or was it at a time where you're just like, yeah, here's a cool thing?
I really wrote that. I wrote it for fun.
I think I mentioned this to you previously. There we go. I'm working on a video at the moment to do with Ius, the animal god, which is what prompted me to reach out to you in the first place.
That is the most random prompt ever.
I was drawn to it initially because I was looking through Elder Scrolls creatures or something, and it said wombat. And where the hell is there a wombat in the Elder Scrolls?
Right.
It's in Ius, the animal god. By the way, thank you. I think that's the only Australian animal in any Elder Scrolls game. And
is that sure?
As an Australian, thank you.
That's probably true.
So with Ius in mind, can you explain the backstory to Ius? Because it's a very strange book.
It is. I'll tell you the backstory. So the backstory was, and literally, I think Ius was the first book ever written for Elder Scrolls.
I love that so much.
Well, I know, because it's bizarre. So the overall story was that in Arena, if you travel to a particular town, and I don't remember where.
Rock Creek or Rock Park.
Oh,
or
you know, well, I was gonna say you since you're you're much more the expert on this book. I wrote it, but you're more the expert on it. That if you travel there, if you do like fast travel and you pop into the town and you go right into your business, but then you try to leave the town, there is a building in your way. Like, it's a walled city, but there's a building in the way of the exit. Is a big mess up. Like one of the many bugs in Bethesda games. And I'm talking to our Council of Wisdom, our beta testers, about it, and I said, "Oh, that has all to do with this story. You don't know about the animal god that the reason because of this." And they're like, they know me well enough. Anybody who knows me knows I guess go around. And I wrote the story to explain why there's a building blocking the way out of this town.
So, overall, Ius is an Easter egg, and a jestful nod to QA testers in the form of an odd little nugget of lore, which introduces a god of animals, talking raccoons, and of course the biggest and best part, the magic wombat. So naturally, it is not to be taken too seriously, but then again, what Elder Scrolls lore is. This is understood, and we know Ius was not written with a cohesive lore existence in mind. Ius was created before the Aedra and the Daedra even existed within the official Elder Scrolls lore. So it's no surprise that Ius was created, he was mustered up without a scrutinizable or explainable place within the lore, as there basically wasn't any substantial Elder Scrolls lore at the time of Arena's release and Daggerfall's early development, apart from the races and the provinces. But as Ius is in the games, he is technically canon. As when it comes to canon lore, there's one golden rule: what is in the games is canon. And while yes, Ius could be considered an antique piece of lore, written as a bit of fun and never mentioned again, he's more than that. As Ted revealed to us, it was literally the first book ever written for the Elder Scrolls games. That's huge. There's only one first book ever written for the Elder Scrolls games, and this is the one. We cannot just let poor old Ius fade away into the night quietly. Things like Ius are what make the Elder Scrolls the fantasy universe that we love so dearly. Weird, wacky, strange, out there characters and concepts cloaked in mystery and emanating a warming sense of boundless creativity, shining ever so brightly and funnily through the dull mundanity of so many fantasy stories and concepts. Things like Ius, to me at least, are what make the Elder Scrolls the Elder Scrolls. So while there is no official lore place for Ius or explanation, we will do our very best to find one for him. So let's prod around and see if we can come up with a deeper and more fleshed out lore explanation for Ius, the extremely agitated god of animals. And just quickly before we begin, given Ius's only in-game appearance is a statue in Arena, a friend of mine, Skeletal K, has drawn up a much more eye-friendly interpretation of Ius. You can check out her link tree down below for all of her social media, art, and YouTube channels. Okay, so what do we know about Ius? Well, he's quite powerful. He can hear the pleas and prayers of those that beckon him, specifically animals, such as the ox and the wombat. He can appear out of thin air instantly, he can consume humans whole, and he can materialize entire equipment stores into existence immediately. And sure, the context of all of this happening is quite goofy, but again it's canon, and to be quite frank, these are some very standout qualities of power, especially on the mortal plane of Mundus. Sure, a Daedric prince can do as he pleases within his plane of oblivion, but on the mortal plane, on Mundus, on Nirn, these kind of abilities and powers are almost unheard of. So it is clear that Ius isn't just some magic rat or something like that, as his abilities he exercises are truly outstanding. Speaking of, however, let's discuss his appearance. In Arena, which by the way is his only official in-game appearance, Ius appears as a humanoid creature that seems to be a mixture between a rodent and a large cat, and a human hunched with an impish posture, face garnished with blazing red eyes and sharp fangs. Raised above his head are of course the seemingly out of place golden scales or balance weights or staff perhaps, flaming with a ferocity that matches the swift justice that Ius delivers. So we've got one interesting little fella on our hands here. Now naturally, me being me, I did trudge through the entirety of the Elder Scrolls Bestiary, which is very, very extensive, and I can find no such creature that fits the appearance of Ius. There are a few things that kind of look similar. The closest I could find is the Faun of High Isle, who do have ancient druidic roots, which could be used to explain this kind of protect nature energy that Ius seems to have. But we can see that while somewhat similar, Ius and the Fauns of High Isle are not the same creatures at all. Now, given his animal cross-human appearance, one's mind naturally wanders into the realm of lycanthropy, which the Elder Scrolls universe provides a rather coloured selection, as there are were-bats, were-bears, were-boars, were-crocodiles, were-lions, were-sharks, were-vultures, and of course werewolves. A fun list, but none of them seem to really match up with Ius. Could he perhaps be a previously unseen variant of lycanthrope? A were-rat? A were-panther? A were-binturong? While highly unlikely, well, I guess it is technically possible. But aesthetic aside, lycanthropy doesn't explain Ius's godlike powers at all. Sure, lycanthropes are powerful in a sense, with enhanced strengths and dexterity, new skills and abilities gained from their animalistic attributes, but animal telepathy, teleportation, materializing buildings, these kind of divine traits cannot be credited to lycanthropy. Unless perhaps Ius was some kind of super powerful wizard who turned into a lycanthrope that we've never seen before, that might explain it. But let's just say that Ius was in fact some kind of lycanthrope. Well, this would associate him with the Daedric prince Hircine, which at face value seems quite fitting, I must say, with Hircine being the huntsman, the lord of the hunt, the master of beasts, the master of the chase, and of course the father of man-beasts. But Hircine is the master of the hunt. His spheres involve hunting and killing beasts, Daedric and mortal kind. His great antlered headwear is said to be that of Ylfr's champion, the Grat Elk, whom Hircine slew out of jealousy. Hircine is a hunter and kills animals rather than aiding them. So these characteristics most certainly do not align with those of Ius. But Hircine might be involved, but we'll speak on that a little later when we touch on Demi-Princes. But if you were like me, you might have gone, ooh, god of animals, Valenwood, jungles, Bosmeri, protects animals, aha, it's something to do with the Green Pact. Which, fair play, I had the same thought, but the paving on this path of thought is far less solid than we may initially believe. Now, if you are unfamiliar with it, the Green Pact is a strict code between the Bosmer and Ylfri to preserve the green, that being the natural world of Nirn. The rules of the Green Pact are simple and clear. Do not harm the forests of Valenwood. Do not eat anything made from plant life. Eat only meat. When enemies are conquered, their meat must be eaten, not left to rot. Do not kill wastefully. Do not take on the shape of beasts. So in a sense, the Green Pact is actually the opposite of what Ius appears to stand for, that being the protection of animals, as the Green Pact is basically the protection of plants, and they say, so the animals. Although it is important to note that Ius doesn't just simply protect all animals all the time, he only comes to the aid of those in need and that pray to him and ask for assistance. Well, at least that is all we have to work with given the examples shown in the one and only text that mentions him. So firstly, this is interesting as Ius can talk to animals, which is not something I've heard of before within the Elder Scrolls universe. Please correct me if there is an example of this. But we can also draw that some animals are sacred to Ius, such as the wombat in the book we read. But it would seem that this wombat can also communicate with humans? I'm guessing here, but Lady Grillina somehow knows who Ius is, and she also knows that her pet wombat is sacred to Ius. She also speaks to the wombat who understands her, her father speaks to the wombat who understands her, and the wombat then passes this information on through prayer to Ius. Of course, for any of this to happen, there needs to be some kind of human-to-wombat communication or vice versa. But going back to the Green Pact, interestingly, the evil farmer was slaughtering all of his stock, which could be seen as killing wastefully. Although, to be fair, he was doing this to hold a great feast, where assumedly all of the meat would be used to feed the guests of the feast. So it's a bit iffy whether or not this would be considered as breaking the tenets of the Green Pact and actually killing wastefully. Now, the Green Pact also states that conquered enemies must be eaten, which is exactly what Ius does to the evil farmer. He conquers him and eats him. Well, actually, both of these happen at the exact same moment, which was ensuring that the farmer's meat didn't go to waste. And despite Ius's actions in Rock Park leading to the wombat being killed, the wombat was also eaten, along with everyone else trapped inside the palace. So technically, Ius's actions of blocking the entrance with an equipment store led to a very gory and twisted event of insanity and cannibalism, but the whole thing actually follows the tenets of the Green Pact. Eat only meat, the fallen must be eaten, and their flesh must not be left to rot. Well, all of those rules were followed at Rock Creek/Rock Park. These names are interchangeable, by the way. So in this sense, Ius could be seen as following the teachings of the Green Pact, which would make him associated with Ylfri. However, fundamentally, Ius also seems to break the Green Pact, as its last teaching is, do not take on the shape of beasts. This line is specifically referencing a magical trait that all Bosmer have called the Wild Hunt, which is not to be confused with the Great Hunt of Hircine, which is also sometimes referred to as the Wild Hunt. In modern Elder Scrolls games, these names have been fixed, so Hircine's Great Hunt is always referred to as the Great Hunt, and the Bosmeri Wild Hunt is always referred to as the Wild Hunt, as so we do not get confused. But this Bosmeri Wild Hunt is something very strange and really interesting indeed. Now, we will speak on this a lot more a little later, as this could explain Ius. But for now, we will move on to the only other deity that I can think of that could somewhat be associated with animals, which is Kynareth, or specifically her role in the Nordic pantheon, Kyne. Ancient Nords referred to her as Sister Hawk, but this is no surprise, as all of the gods had an animal aspect within the Nordic pantheon. But even to this day, Kyne is often referred to as Mother of Men and beasts. She is linked to the natural world, the plants, the animals, and the weather. Now, in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, there is also the quest Kyne's Sacred Trials, which we can partake in, during which we must hunt down and slay guardian beasts to earn favor in the eyes of Kyne, to prove that we are a hunter and not just a butcher, as Kyne teaches us to respect beasts and blesses the hunter who will face their champions. Now, respecting beasts is one thing, but we literally have to kill a bunch of guardian animals, which immediately, in my eyes at least, really does not align with what Ius seems to stand for. However, in the cases of the farmer and the ox, along with the magic wombat, well, these animals were not being respected, and Ius acted on it, punishing those who had not respected the beasts. So maybe he does align with Kyne somewhat, but I honestly feel the pencil too short and the paper too long to connect these two dots meaningfully. This journey is a tough slog, but so far, when trying to figure out what exactly Ius is, naturally we've been attempting to connect him with existing deities. And given Ius' affiliation with animals, being the god of animals and all, well, as we've seen when it comes to existing deities and gods that are associated with animals within the Elder Scrolls, there are a fair few that we can connect with animals in one sense or another. But the true problem is the specific nature of Ius' relationship with animals not matching any other gods. As animals pray to Ius, he hears their pleas and comes to their aid in a gory, aggressive, and twisted sense, sure, but he does turn up, and very promptly. He is a god of immediate action, which is not common at all within the Elder Scrolls. Think about it, the Aedra might as well not exist, as they do jack all. And of course, the Daedric Princes are extremely limited in their presence and actions on Mundus. So these particular aspects make it very difficult to link Ius to an existing and known deity, as his very interactive habits and animalistic moral direction don't line up with any gods that we can name or point out. But what if we have been barking up the wrong tree? What if we don't need to connect him to an existing deity? What if Ius is his own divine being, totally removed from commonly known and worshipped gods? An interesting thought. As we know, there are a colossal amount of names for deities within the Elder Scrolls universe, but most of these are just cultural variations of the known Aedra, Daedra, and primal forces. However, not many know this, but there are also a rather large number, of more obscure gods, esoteric deities, occult beings, and divine powers and/or people of worship that are not known to be related or connected to any of the commonly worshipped pantheons. Just some examples of these are as follows: Agamannus and Egon, the Sphinxes of Giza and Canis, worshipped in some parts of elsewhere, the Adversary and the All-Maker of the Skull, the mysterious astral concept of the All-Fire to the Orcs, the primitive island deity Arius, god of fire and volcanoes, the obscure blind god, ruler and guardian of the Mantellan Crux, and also friend of Sheogorath, the famous Deep Ones of Hackdirt, which I do already have a video covering fully. You can check that out above if you so desire. There is Druaga, the old world goddess of flowers, whose worship has all but died out. Or Raymond Ebenarm, the Black Knight, god of war and enemy of all Daedric princes. There's the esoteric Goroflox, the Unholy, the Herd Mother of the Horsemen of Silverhoof Vale, or the lost name insect god to whom Flower King Nilichi sacrificed unto, the unknown music god Jimsai of Hyrock, Kel, upon whom the Witch King of Ebonheart, King Moralin of the Ra-Athim swore unto, or the Bretonic Matilda, peer of Akatosh, described as a great golden dragon. We have Marduk the Good, whose name is invoked in times of thankfulness, the Bosmeri Mystria of the Curse, Notorgo, the messenger god of the Iliac Bay, Ogma, the goddess of records and wife of Xerxes, or Orca, the unbanishable cursed tongue of the Khajiit, or the Khajiiti Riddle Thar, Two Moons Dance, promisor of paradise, or if you want to flip a coin, Sai, the god of luck. There is Shandar, god of war and blesser of weapons. There is the unknown and unknowable concept of the spring seed, or Una, the great green elk of the druids. There's Vigril, god of the sea, and the Wilder King of the tribal wood elves. And finally for this list there is Zegi Madonna of Tears, goddess of water. And that is to just name some of the more obscure gods within the Elder Scrolls universe that, people have never heard of, all of which are mysterious, and we may just discuss another day. But for now, the point of that list was that we may not have to make Ius fit into any known category of god or divine being or link him to an existing deity, as he may just stand alone and be unique from all others. Which, as we just learned, there are plenty of deities of this same undefined or undefinable nature, who, unlike me, cannot be pegged into a simple category. So this is actually quite nice and freeing, knowing that we don't need to find a category to plonk Ius into. We can just leave it there, he just is. Well, we could just leave it there, but not on my watch. As after a lot of reading, I found two possibilities that I would love to explore with you that I think could best explain Ius's origins, both of which we have already mentioned briefly earlier. Firstly is the Wild Hunt. Now, if you are unfamiliar with the Bosmeri Wild Hunt, Bosmeri being of the Wood Elves, it is quite an event. You see, it is believed by the Bosmeri people that during the Dawn era the world was chaos. They refer to this state or time as the Chaos Times or simply the Ooze, during which the early mortals, or in this particular case the Bosmer, were unable to hold onto a single form for more than a moment, turning into plants and animals and back again. But once the Green Pact was sealed, Y'ffre taught the Bosmer how to escape the chaos of the Ooze and retain their form permanently, but he also taught them how to return to the chaos through a massive and dire ritual known as the Wild Hunt. Now, this Wild Hunt ritual does actually break the final tenet of the Green Pact, that being, do not take on the shape of beasts. However, Y'ffre does permit it when necessary. It is also said that some Bosmer can undertake a Wild Hunt transformation outside of a collective ritual. However, this is shunned by Y'ffre and is punishable for breaking the Green Pact. Now, with all of that said, the Wild Hunt is a very rare occurrence, only to be used in the most desperate of circumstances. It's kind of like the nuclear weapon of the Bosmer. You do it once or twice and you go, okay, that's enough. As to date, there have only been 3 recorded cases of the Wild Hunt being performed. So you may be asking, what does this have to do with Ius? Well, I think it is possible that Ius could be a surviving remnant of a Wild Hunt, as the results spawning from one of these rituals are truly unique, and that is putting it very nicely. What does that mean? Well, okay, strap yourself in for this horror show. The Wild Hunt is a magical trait innate in all Bosmer. It is brought on by a mass ritual undertaken by many Bosmer, which causes them to lose their form and return to the Ooze, to the chaos. They shapeshift into a ferocious horde of feral eldritch beasts. The Wild Hunt has been described as a pack of shifting forest demons and animal gods thousands strong. These shapeshifters are stripped of their flesh from their bones and turn into creatures that, and I quote, defy all attempts to identify them. It's a flood of horrific beasts, tentacled toads, insects of armor and spine, gelatinous serpents, vaporous beings with the face of gods, blind in fury. Some may not even turn into creatures at all, and instead change into great writhing tongues, unfettered by lips or teeth. Or they may take on a gaseous form, which is impossible to contain or contend with without the aid of magic. Along with this, there are even some suggestions that they can take on the form of water or great foaming waves of blood. And these forms that they take on are not static, as they may appear like a serpent one moment and shift into another creature the next. When the Bosmer do invoke the Wild Hunt, it causes a change in wild animals as well. Beasts typically transform into beings that are part plant and part animal. Once this transformation has taken place, it cannot be undone. In fact, it has been mused that every monster in the world that has ever existed has come from a previous Wild Hunt. These Wild Hunt monsters murderously stampede, changing and shifting their form constantly, slaughtering, devouring, consuming, and slaying everything in their path within seconds. Eventually, when there are no surviving foes, a Wild Hunt will turn upon itself, which has been quoted as being a cannibalistic orgy. So, wowee! That is quite a cycle, but by the sounds of it, all of these Wild Hunt monsters die at the end of it when they all eat one another at the end of the day. So how could this explain Ius? Well, friends, it turns out that this isn't actually the case at all, as there have been documented Wild Hunt monsters surviving and roaming long after a ritual was invoked. In fact, it is said that they are not only ferocious, but rather importantly, they are long-lived, able to stay alive for periods naturally beyond the normal lifespan of an elf. Two notable examples of this are Willie the Bitten, I've been there, who is said to still plague Sylvanar Grove in northern Valenwood, and along with Willie there is King Dead Wolf Deer, who stalks the Linpar March in southeastern Valenwood. So, not only do we know that some Wild Hunt monsters remain after the ritual and the chaos, but they also live for a very long time. Along with this, we also know that they can basically have the appearance of anything that you can dare think of, or anything that our mortal minds cannot think of. And along with this, there are two very interesting quotes. As when attempting to describe the Wild Hunt, two things jumped out at me in regards to Ius. Firstly, beings with the face of gods, blind in fury, and a pack of shifting forest demons and animal gods. Sound familiar to anyone else? Animal gods, blind in fury. Well, that is quite literally to the T describing Ius, the extremely agitated god of animals. Now, this is extremely interesting and makes our venture down this wild path most certainly worth it. But we do have one problem, and that is Ius's powers. While yes, the Wild Hunt monsters are most certainly ferocious and not a force to be trifled with, there is no mention of them having magical powers, or in the case of Ius, seemingly divine powers. This is potentially problematic. However, we are entering the realm where canon knowledge kind of runs dry. So, with that in mind, with no one to tell us no, I was thinking, what if an extremely talented Bosmer wizard underwent a Wild Hunt transformation? Would he retain his previous magical capabilities and become a horrific eldritch beast, but with access to masterful arcane abilities? Well, that would work, but we simply don't know, as there's nothing that says so either way. It's not deniable nor affirmable whether that's possible. There are, of course, other things like Ius just could be an old Elna Fae, or perhaps he's an Earthbone that undertook the Wild Hunt. So he's both some kind of unseen beast, but also has these great powers. All of these are fairly valid origin stories for Ius, the extremely agitated god of animals. They are most certainly not confirmable, but they're also most certainly not deniable, which just lands them on the plateau of plausible. However, I do believe there may be a somewhat more valid origin story for Ius, although it is equally, if not more obscure than the Wild Hunt. What do I speak of, I can hear you asking? Well, as we mentioned right at the start of the video, there is a small and seldom spoken of group of beings known as Demi-Princes. Now, this topic is somewhat difficult to dive deeply into due to Demi-Princes being so obscure within the lore that we don't really have a ton of information to go off. However, there are most certainly some interesting points to be found. So, what is a Demi-Prince? Well, if you are familiar with the concept of a demigod in real-life mythology, you'll know where this is headed. A Demi-Prince, as the name might suggest, are the offspring of a Daedric Prince and a lesser being such as a mortal. So they're not as powerful as a Daedric Prince, but they're not as limited as a mortal. They're somewhere in the middle, as these Demi-Princes often inherit some of the princely aspects and attributes of their Daedric Prince parents. They are said to often be eccentric and lacking in common characteristics like foresight, memory, cruelty, and willfulness. Some Demi-Princes are given minor pocket realms of oblivion to rule over, although it is said that these realities are bizarre, even by the standards of oblivion. But interestingly, Demi-Princes are known to not only visit Mundus, but sometimes live on Mundus for extended periods of time. They are also able to freely walk the mortal plane, unlike their Daedric Prince parents. This is very interesting, as we could have an entity with basically the powers of a Daedric Prince without the limitations of a Daedric Prince. Now, the list of Demi-Princes is quite short, even when we include the list of debatable possible Demi-Princes. However, examples of these ever-rare Demi-Princes are beings such as Alandro Sul, shield companion of Indoral Nerevar, during the War of the First Council. It is said that he is the immortal son of Azura. There is also Emeg Gro Kyra, a great orcish warrior raised by a tribal shaman who was said to be the son of Malakath. There is also Haemon Cameron, better known as the Heart King or the Cameron Usurper. While it is commonly written that he was part of the Bosmeri Cameron lineage, just like Mankar Cameron, it is rumoured that he is in fact the child of a Breton woman and Molag Bal, although these reports are questionable. However, there is Molag Grunda, who is a strange one, as she is a very rude and sarcastic winged twilight, who is the daughter of Molag Bal, but from her own mouth, she is unsure as to what this relationship means to her father. And well, she has a rather big half-brother, Azozakar, a formidable Daedric titan, son of Molag Bal. Anyway, there is also a mysterious female being known as the Impresario, who is said to be a Demi-Prince disguised as a mortal merchant as so she may travel Tamriel unhindered. This is one of many theories that have arisen in an attempt to explain her penchant for trading vast amounts of treasure in return for tales of valor and victory. Along with her, we have another Demi-Prince, simply known as the Demi-Prince of Pastries, of whom little is known, although we do know that Sheogorath considers her to be one of the few worthy of wielding his fabled artifact, the Wabberjack. While her lineage is not known, with this knowledge we can take a wild stab in the dark and assume that her father is in fact the god of madness, Sheogorath. We also have probably the most well-known and most accomplished Demi-Prince, Fanuit Hen, the multiplier of motions known. He is the scion of Boethia and rules over his pocket realm, the Maelstrom. Fanuit Hen appears several times in the 36 Lessons of Vivec, where he met Vivec as a young man. It is said that this Demi-Prince is older than time. Now, Fanuit Hen has also collected the known motions of every martial discipline in Nirn, the earliest being the prismatic vector dance of the Elnefe. He even obtained some of his motions from observing the god Hunding making way, whatever that means. And rather amusingly, he befriended the demigod Morahouse, the winged bull, with whom he would drink and dice. And lastly, we have what I believe to be the most relevant for Ius. The final Demi-Prince is a woman named Dirola, daughter of Hircine, that's her actual name, who, as you might have picked up on from her name, is the daughter of the Daedric Prince Hircine. Now, her story is interesting, as in the Song of Gwina, it is claimed that Dirola intermingled with the Reach folk. One of her descendants was Chief Roalan, whose mystical prowess is attributed to his lineage, aka the fact that he is the ancestor of Dirola, a demi-prince of Hircines. Now, this is interesting because even the distant descendants of this demi-prince wield notable powers, just as Chief Roalan did. Well, okay, now just imagine the powers of an actual demi-prince. Someone like Fanuit Hen is a great example. We can assume that these demi-princes have roughly half the power of a Daedric prince, as they are half Daedric prince. Well, with this in mind, this would mean that, quite frankly, demi-princes are extremely powerful. Powerful in a sense that can't even be put into words. Their abilities would be far, far beyond what any mere mortal could ever hope to realistically achieve. And bolstering the interest in this is a point we made earlier, as the one thing stopping Daedric princes from openly wreaking havoc on Mundus constantly is their inability to freely move and act on the mortal plane. But demi-princes do not have this limitation. They can come and go, wander around and do as they please in Mundus, on Nirn, throughout the mortal plane. So what we have here is what I believe to be the most plausible origin story for Ius, the extremely agitated god of animals. Now, to what Daedric prince and to what mortal he was born, we can only speculate, but the concept of Ius being a demi-prince explains his unique appearance, as they can basically take any form they want. It would also explain his flaming staff or set of scales or balance weights or whatever they are, as you know, he just wants to wield them. No problem, demi-princes do as they please. And it would also explain his otherworldly powers, his divine powers, his limitless powers, his actions that seem to defy all logic and even magic within the Elder Scrolls universe. And of course, it would explain how he came to be, where he came from. So with Demi-Princes and the Wild Hunt, we do have origin stories for our boy Ius that fits within the lore rather well. And of course, take all of this with a grain of salt, as it all is just speculation, but speculation within the bounds of canon lore, which was rather tough to do as the only in-game appearance of Ius is a couple of statues in Arena, and the only mention of Ius ever is in this single yet wonderful book that Ted Peterson wrote all those decades ago, even years before the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall was released. It was the very first book ever written for the Elder Scrolls series. So while yes, we did have little to work with, pat yourself on the back, look just how far we've come. Ah yes, now there is one other thing worth mentioning in regards to Ius, however. As early concept art from the Elder Scrolls Online for the Celestial Mage, well, it wasn't called the Celestial Mage, it had a different name, that being Ius. So does this mean that someone at ZeniMax Online Studios was planning for the Celestial Mage to actually be Ius, god of animals? Well, the name being here might suggest so. However, I did a lot of reading into the Celestials and specifically the Celestial Mage, and I really cannot even find a single piece of common ground between Ius and the Celestial Mage. So this really doesn't make much sense as an explanation. It is worth mentioning, however, that the Celestial Warrior concept art also had a strange name, that being Ebenarm, who we did mention earlier, as he is also an obscure god that has actually been removed from a lot of writings in the later games, which quite frankly makes me sick. But anyway, this is likely just a concept artist having some fun rather than there being original grand plans for Ius to secretly be the Celestial Mage. And with all of that said, I sure do bloody hope that in future Elder Scrolls content, whether that be the Elder Scrolls 6, the Elder Scrolls Online, or spin-off games that have not yet begun development, I really truly do hope that obscure gods like Ius and Ebenarm make an appearance. The Elder Scrolls history and lore, it's old and it's vast and it's so colourful. There are so many wonderful topics to explore and beings to encounter, yet it just seems that we're constantly being bored to death by the same old, the Adria and the Daedra. while at the same time, incredibly interesting forgotten gods like Ius and Ebonarm sit gathering dust in the cupboard. It's so sad, but hopefully this has piqued your interest in such gods and drummed up excitement and the want for the revival, the reoccurrence, the reappearance of some of these great lore pieces. I hope that you, just like me, would love to see things like Ius and Ebonarm and all the other obscure gods that we mentioned in future Elder Scrolls content. It's all there, it already exists. Please stop giving us Daedra and Aedra. If you happen to work at ZeniMax Online Studios or Bethesda Game Studios or any other studio working on an Elder Scrolls game, or perhaps you'll work there in the future, please take full advantage of this great lore that already exists rather than sweeping it under the rug like poor old Ius. But points like that are all in a day's work when it comes to investigating the Elder Scrolls series and its many strange stories. So I do hope that you've learned something new about the beautifully mad universe that these wonderful games take place in, the Elder Scrolls. If you have any information, facts, evidence, speculation, points, theories, corrections, or anything to do with Ius, the extremely agitated god of animals, I would love to hear what you have to say. If you have any ideas for something that should be covered in an Elder Scrolls Detective Series video, be sure to let me know what that is. I'll look into whatever strange and obscure topics that you present. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a kindness and leave a like to help others know that you enjoyed it. Leave a comment with your Elder Scrolls Detective video ideas and your thoughts on the ever so wacky tale of Ius and the Magic Wombat. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more content similar to this, please subscribe. It helps me know that you enjoyed the video and will result in more videos like this in the long run. Be sure to click the little bell icon next to the subscribe button right here on YouTube so that you'll be notified when a new Elder Scrolls Detective video is uploaded. Now, my other Elder Scrolls Detective videos can be found down in the description via the Elder Scrolls Detective playlist link. Down there are also links to all of my social media. Be sure to check all of that out and follow me on everything just to keep up to date with what I'm up to between videos. And of course, be sure to check out the merch store. There is a ton of cool Elder Scrolls related stuff on there, most of which I painstakingly designed myself. But purchasing some merch is a fantastic way to support what I do here on the channel while also getting something very cool for yourself. Now, if you did enjoy this video and you would like to help support the channel in a more personal way, of course, grab some hot merch. You can become a patron on Patreon, become a member with a join button right here on YouTube, or drop a super thanks with the super thanks button just below the video. As I'm sure you know, all of my time and energy goes into making these videos that I create for you to enjoy. So your support is most genuinely appreciated and welcomed in any and all forms. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. I've been Camel, and I will see you very shortly in the next video. I'll see you there soon.